Hey Perilous fans, this is Daniel Fox again, and we're going to walk through the Generalist Petty Magic deck tonight. Now, those of you who already have the Arcane or Divine deck actually already have these cards in there. However, we've been getting a lot of requests for people who just want to run one-shots and have cards available for the GM or a player who may be stepping in. So we decided to carve out just the Generalist Petty Magic cards for those purposes. So once again, the art and layout is done by Ken Duque, and you can see that these all have these swords on it for the Generalist Petty Magic. But as we kind of go through it, you'll see some familiar spells. Obviously, Aegis, once again, one skull because it's Petty Magic, specifically Generalist Petty Magic, which anyone can use, whether you have Arcane or Divine Magic. And actually, in our next book, we'll be releasing a new version of Magic called Covenant Magic. So you'll also get access to these as well, despite that. Because remember, all casters share the same bed of spells, like Weapon, Bewitched. And of course, it's up to you to kind of color those spells however you wish. It may come from a divine source, perhaps Cack-Handed Grasp was granted to you by the Night Father if you have Divine Magic. Or maybe even Candlelight kind of comes from hedge wizardry, perhaps that your character learned living out in the woods. Maybe Dispel Magic is something that is specific to Arcane Magic. Maybe your character doesn't have that if you're Divine Caster. It's kind of up to you to really define what those look like. Once again, you'll notice that the reagents, of course, in this case, a hat trick, a bag hat, or pocket from where an animal can be withdrawn. Put a lot of fun castings with this in the game, actually. Several mutated chickens, straight kittens with dog heads, things of that nature. Always a fun little spell to use. Haunting, another great one, too. Notice every spell has a distance. That's essentially, where you can cast it. Any one place you can see. So where your character can see, as far as they can see. That's kind of up to the game master to define, because it may be different for when you're standing in the mist or in the darkness or in bright light. Reagents, the death shroud of someone murdered. Duration, 3+ willpower bonus in minutes. Most spells have a duration kind of defined that way in minutes, because you remember a turn is only 10 seconds. So in a lot of cases, it's just not necessary to even track the duration of spells. And that's done by purpose. So you can play it without having to worry too much about tracking a bunch of stuff like you would in Dungeons and Dragons or other game systems. We want to give you the flexibility to focus on the action and not necessarily tracking a bunch of stuff along the way. You have enough to worry about with your damage and peril condition tracks and use of action points and so forth. So durations are left in minutes in most cases for that reason alone. We've got Hush, another fantastic spell. You raise a several thimble up to your lips and you make someone unable to speak or communicate, which is kind of cool. Indomitable Spirit, they increase their peril threshold, a nice little buff spell that uses a shell of a tortoise, which is expended whenever it's cast. And notice the duration here is 3+ willpower bonus in hours. So you maybe won't be able to cast that if you're preparing to walk into a dangerous situation, for instance. And of course, like every spell, it has an effect. A critical success if you get a match and you succeed on your spell. And a critical failure if you match and fail your roll. You got Magic Missile. If you don't know what that does, well, you may want to step back and read about the history of RPGs. Everybody knows what Magic Missile does. That's a commonality across a lot of games, I believe. But we've kind of colored that differently over the years, too. I know people were using Magic Missile to look like, ghostly skulls firing from somebody's hand. Sometimes it's been colored from the perspective of a thin lightning bolt. Sometimes it's lancing rain. There's a lot of different ways you can color this. You'll notice that we don't really include the kind of fluff effects beneath the spell. We kind of leave that up to you to define. So, for instance, Pinprick. When you cast a spell, a foe suffers 1d10+ willpower bonus and physical peril. You can color that in a lot of different ways. It could be the intervention of a god. It could be, as the reagent says, you're simply pricking somebody with a needle and they kind of cast that magic. Or it could be something totally different. It's kind of up to you to flavor that however you want, being an arcane, divine, or even a covenant magic user, which you'll see once again in our next expansion. Rain Shade. Nice fun little spell. Robber's Misery, duration forever. After successfully casting a spell, a key you touch can be used to permanently lock one portal or door. It can't be picked or opened without use of the key, but it can be busted open. So if somebody is, wants to bust through the door with a mallet and hammer the hinges off, surely that'll work. But regardless, a fun little spell. Sanctuary. We've also got Subdue, render somebody helpless for 3 plus willpower bonus in minutes. A really, really useful spell. Super useful, because when you're rendered helpless, you can be killed with just one stab of a sword or knife or arrow, whatever it may be. Trackless Step, nobody can track you. Kind of neat. Vow of Fealty, we really like this one here. Distance any one person you can touch. Reagents a willing participant. This basically can have enfeeble somebody, or they vow a pledge to you to carry out a specific action. And actually, in the next book, there is a interesting use of vow of fealty tied to one of the new professions, which you'll see. Warding, which is a neat little spell too. You can be made aware if somebody touches something or trespasses or steals something that may be yours. Whether you're asleep or 100 leagues away, it doesn't really matter. It can be any object or portal you can touch. Will-o'-the-wisp, that's a fun one right there. And then finally, Witch Sight, which those of you who have played an Inquisitor expert profession know that they can actually use that on command. It's a professional trait as well, but regardless, it's a spell here too. So, well, that's about it for Generalist Petty Magic spells. Not nearly as exciting as the massive decks for Arcane or Divine, but once again, just to reiterate, if you buy the Arcane or the Divine deck, you already get the Generalist Petty Magic spell in there. This deck is specifically designed for those who just want to grab something, make a smaller purchase, have something for a one-shot, or have some extra cards just to share around the table. So we'll have another product here to showcase, I believe, here in early February. For those who are paying attention on Facebook, we're doing some monster cards, which look pretty slick. So our next video will probably be that. But in the meantime, I wish you a happy, growing, perilous adventuring for 2018, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.